It's my great pleasure to welcome you all here this evening. Vice President Jaraus, members of the Advisory Board, ladies and gentlemen, we're gathered here this evening for the official opening of the Käte Hamburger Kolleg Global Disconnect. This is quite an occasion. It's not every day that a university is able to present, open, and run a Käte Hamburger Kolleg. These are really quite institutions of quite some substance, and they require a certain amount of energy and effort to acquire. I'm welcoming you here too on the behalf of my two co-directors who you will meet in the course of the evening, Boris Dogramace from Art History, and of course Roland Renzelhumer from Global History. My name is Christopher Baum. I'm from Theatre Studies. And as you can hear from these three subjects, this colleague is very much an interdisciplinary undertaking. It was conceived in an interdisciplinary spirit, and we, I think, conceived this idea really in a kind of convergence of three disciplines, which have been three scholars and disciplines all working on questions of globalization.
Ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, friends, as I said in the beginning, it is an honor and indeed a pleasure to see so many of you here tonight. These days, when you say something like this, it always also means it is a pleasure to see so many of you here tonight in person, in situ, to see so many of you here despite the pandemic. And I certainly second that, of course. At the same time, however, I would like to claim that tonight we are not here in this place, not just despite the pandemic, but also in the midst of the pandemic. With this, I do not mean that the pandemic is not over yet, which is undoubtedly true. Rather, I mean that it will always accompany us as one of the prime examples of global disconnectivity and its various fallouts. COVID has made it unmistakably clear that disconnections, the breaking down of established structures and certainties, the lightning fast emergence of new forms of connectivity to mitigate this breakdown, that all that is part and parcel of processes of globalization.
Dear ladies and gentlemen, a warm welcome from me too to the special evening on which we celebrate the opening of the Käte Hamburger Kolleg Global Disconnect. Today, Monica Juneja will speak in her keynote lecture on awkward, unstable, creative, disconnection as world making. Dear Monica, we are very much looking forward to your lecture. The floor is yours.
When Roland wrote to me some 10 months back, inviting me to this occasion, this prospect of physically standing here amidst all of you felt like a distance, but at the same time, very reassuring prospect. And so it's inevitable that I have to start with these experiences that we had for the last 2 years. You know, after all these months, when many of us have had our brush with the virus, today being here is like this famous quote-unquote learning to live with the pandemic. All in all, this was a thought-provoking piece, and coming as it did at the time, in the summer of 2020, as Roland has just said, when most of us were still struggling to come to terms with the denial of that which we had taken for granted as constitutive features of our professional and personal lives, travel, meetings, networks, archival visits, all of these involving physical displacement and untrammeled border crossing.
I think Global Disconnect is important because it reduces global histories dependent on mobility. It introduces aspects that are part of any kind of connective relationship, like friction, like incommensurability, like unevenness of globalization across different regions of the world, inequities, and all of these aspects are built into the relationships. Therefore, I think Global Disconnect is really about this dynamic of opposing vectors that makes it a much more fruitful concept than thinking of globalization or global history only in terms of mobility. There are many very interesting aspects of this colleague. I will just mention one because I'm an art historian, and it seemed so innovative to me that it's probably one of the first institutions that actually does not just go across disciplines, it also makes practicing artists part of the institution, practicing artists who also do research, who also produce knowledge, like all of us, who use the same materials, but in very different ways. And I think that kind of dialogue is very fruitful. It will produce many surprises.